Freddy with FreddyCanFly, and in today's video I wanted to talk to you about a couple of tips and tricks for muffler mounting. This particular video we're going to be doing the OS55 power boost pipe. Take in mind, based upon manufacturer and model, some mufflers mount different than others, but the basic principle is going to exist as far as how to do the proper application and get everything sealed up tight. And that's more or less what I wanted to go over. But again, the video is surrounding around this particular muffler, but any of these tips and tricks will help. First thing is getting all your components out, of course. I do have the helicopter muffler ready. That is, of course, going to be important. Get your throttle, all your other things out of the way, get everything set up. That way you can just... mounting the muffler is probably one of the very last things you should be doing before going out to actually fly the machine. There might be a couple of tidy up things to do here and there, but most muffler kits are going to come with a little rubber grommet here. It's an exhaust deflector. You can order these in different fun colors and what have you, but usually the kits will just come with a black one. I've got a metal gasket here. Go ahead and get that out because we're going to be using it. Your kit should always come with your mounting supplies too, your bolts. Take in mind that the bolts have, what do they call these? A spring washer, I think is what that's called. A little locking, it's like a cut in half washer. See if we can get a good close up on it. A little spring washer. Make sure those are on there. Those are going to help with cinching down the motor. If yours comes with the backing nuts, which mine do, I'm going to show you guys a real cool trick on how to make your life easier. Some mufflers out there, like I think the Align muffler has the muffler threaded, which I absolutely hate, because if you over thread that and you thread out the aluminum, your muffler's toast. You got to buy a new one. This one, if I over tighten it on accident, I can just replace the nut or bolt, and my $300 muffler is still usable. So that's always kind of been a big one for me. So I got those. I'm going to show you a cool trick for those. Now, if you are going to be using muffler pressure, so non-regulated motor, your muffler is going to have two attachments. It's going to have a little brass sleeve one here. You're going to want to go ahead and install that. And that's where your muffler pressure line will go. In my case, I'm using crankcase pressure. So my kit also just comes with a little black screw, flathead. And I'm just going to go ahead and plug that hole because we don't want our exhaust pressure and stuff escaping. Now, I'm not going to just put the screw in dry, okay? What I've went ahead and got is some red RTV high temp gasket maker. You can get this at any car store. I think they have it at Walmart, Ace Hardware. Just about any sort of hardware home improvement store, okay? I'm going to put some of this on my threads and make a nice red gasket seal for that. That way it lasts for a long time. And then we're going to be using it on the actual mating process as well. So, with that being said, guys, the first part I want to kind of get out of the way. Again, this is specific to this muffler, but if yours mounts in this same manner, then this should help work. Going to put this onto the Heli is kind of tricky because your hands are over here on this side trying to fiddle with the bolts, and then you've got your gasket maker and everything on here, so you're trying not to make a mess of the helicopter. So it can be a bit of a finicky process. Now, to add more fuel to that fire, these little nuts that they come with, there's only very minimal exposed thread that comes through this side. And the nut actually fits down. Let's see if I can kind of show you on here. The nut fits down into a little sleeve. Get us a little bit of a zoom. If you can see there, it's got little walls. So the nut only fits in one way, right? And that's so that you don't have to use a tool back there, right? You can just go ahead and torque it down. But it is ridiculously hard to get on there, guys. It takes so much fiddling that I'm just not a big fan of doing that. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to really clean those up, make sure they look nice and presentable. And what I'm going to actually do, guys, is I found in my kit I had two small extra little just hex bolts here. Okay, They have the same dimensions, you know, same threading dimensions and everything as the nut. And the way you can tell is, well, just twist the nut on there and boom, it's on there, right? So here's what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix me up a very small, very small batch of 2-part epoxy. I apologize, guys, I'm just getting over a cold. And what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to tack the bolts in place. That way when I go to thread through the opposing side of the motor, it grabs them instantly without them falling off, and then I can tighten them down. If the epoxy breaks after that, then who cares? Because the motor's going to get hot and probably melt it anyways. But basically, in a roundabout way, guys, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my bolt. Oh, and please, pro tip, guys, my bench is really clean. Fiddling around with your muffler, make sure you don't get anything inside this. Make sure no screws fall in there, no cat hair, nothing. If you need to tape it off, tape it off. But just a quick tip, guys, because once you get something stuck in there, it's pretty damn hard to get it out. So, anywho, I'm going to go ahead and put the bolt where it goes. Let's see, throw it in here. And then what I'll end up doing, guys, is again, I'm going to mix up my epoxy. And then all I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to tighten this bolt on here. Not too hard, just snug it into place. What we want it to do, basically, guys, is we just want it to hold its shape. Like that. See if we can get a close-up on that. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my 2-part mixing epoxy just in a little toothpick. And I'm basically just going to run a small little bead right along the outside here. You don't need to, we're not trying to make this permanent, right? So just get a little bead going. We'll wait for it to set up, and then we'll come back and we'll do a little review. Alrighty, guys, quick recap here. So I went ahead and mixed up my epoxy. Again, just a 2-part quick set, maybe, what is it, a 10-15 minute cure. And again, we're not doing this to create any sort of a permanent thing on here. Who knows, might stay on here forever though, depends. But hopefully you can see there. I just ran a little bead right across the front and kind of just nudged a little in the back. The goal is we just want to try to hold that bolt in place long enough that the threads from the opposite side can grab on and just make our life a little bit easier. Because again, the worst part about muffler mounting is you get that big old mess and then all your RTV comes off and then no one's having a fun day. So I'm going to let this set. I'm going to leave these bolts in. Again, another tip is, again, I just lightly tightened them just enough that they break away. Because I don't want them to be so damn tight that when I go to undo those bolts, it breaks my, my epoxy cure, okay? So I'm going to let this set up first, and then we'll come back and let's talk about how we're going to use the RTV, and we'll seal up this port and or install the muffler pressure. Alrighty, guys, so jumping back to it here, I've went ahead and let all of the epoxy work that we did harden up fully. I didn't wait 24 hours or anything, but I gave it, you know, 3-4 hours. And so now you can see, look, I can just kind of pop my bolt out, but my nut will stay right in place. And this is just going to make a world of difference. Now, if you don't believe me on this, or you think this is a little bit overkill, then, you know, by all means, if you've got a better method, or go and try putting your muffler on right now and see how difficult it can be to get these nuts on there. So I'm just double checking. Everything on mine looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and set this. Actually, nope, we still need this. I'm going to set this about right here because we're going to go ahead and let's plug up that top hole. For that, like I said, it's pretty easy and basic, guys. I used just about these are like little plastic tray lids and a toothpick for almost every job out there. So I've got some of my RTV gasket maker stuff out. Let's go ahead and let's seal this up. Guys, you only need the smallest amount of this stuff. Don't waste your products. That's probably even a little bit too much. But you can see I just put a little bit on there. And I'm going to do the same procedure that I would usually do with Loctite. Is I'm going to apply some of this into the threads. Now, some important things to note. We don't want to get any that pushes down in to the muffler and causes any of it to dry off or anything inside the muffler, right? So if you think about the way this works, when we thread the screw in, the liquid works its way up to the top. So I'm going to use a toothpick and I'm going to start an application of this a little bit above where my thread starts. That way I don't risk introducing any of this to the bottom of the threads, because what I ultimately want it to do is I want it to work its way up and make a seal. That's kind of what I'm going for. So I'm going to take a little bit of it here. You can see it does not take much. Okay, we've only got, so I'm going to get this to focus. Camera's been being a little bit of a pain today, you know. We don't need much, guys. Okay, we need just a little bit. So let me start working this on. I'm going to put it up towards the top. Okay, and I kind of just put a little bead right around the screw there. Okay, and then once I have that, you can see, got a little bead right around the screw. I'm going to kind of take my fingers and ever so gently just twist it in the direction that I'm going to be threading, and kind of just try to really thin it out. Okay, get a nice thin application. Any excess that you get coming off, just keep, you know, use your fingers, keep your little paper towel handy. So now you can see with that part done that it made a little bit of a difference. Okay, and then what I'm going to do also is, well, first let's try threading it in and let's see, because I want it to make like a bubble, like a bevel underneath almost. Okay, that's kind of what I'm going for, or at least I'm able to get it almost every time that I do this. So let's thread that in real fast, nice and slow. Make sure, again, don't cross thread this part or anything, so just take your time, go nice and slow, and you'll see as it's going in, it's doing exactly what I said. The RTV is starting to seep up from the top. So as we get closer and closer, what I'm kind of looking forward to do is sandwich and make almost like a little O-ring for me. Nice little sealed red O-ring. Gosh, that's damn near spot on perfect too, guys. Trying to get this right every single time is not the easiest. You got to do it a bunch of times and you'll get used to the amount. It basically comes down to the amount of RTV. Now also we have a liquid forming gasket, right? So I'm not going to tighten this so hard that it smooshes all my stuff out, right? So I'm kind of looking for the pressure to make a nice, good ring right around it, and that looks pretty good to me, and it feels tight. So let's see if I can get a bit of a zoom on this, and hopefully you guys can see in detail how perfect that looks. Look at that, a nice perfect little red seal. The bolt's fastened down all the way to where I got it tight and just gave it a quick torque. And then once this hardens, once that seals, all the way from the threads up until the top of that bolt, there should be no exhaust gas that leaks out of there. So that's going to be that step there, guys. Again, make sure that if you're going to be handling the muffler around a little bit more, just be really careful to avoid disturbing or interrupting this part. From then, guys, let's move on. I'm going to go ahead and grab the helicopter out, and let's start getting the motor attached to the machine. The muffler attached to the machine, I'm sorry. Alrighty, guys, so for this next part here, we're going to get ready to prep the surfaces for, I don't know, I guess we'll call it mating the surfaces, just to make that relevant. So I'm going to start here with the exhaust port. Again, it's clean and it's free from any debris that could potentially enter in there. One trick that you can do is go ahead and turn your starter shaft, and I like to make sure that the you can see the piston moving there. I like to make sure that that is closed while doing this as well. So right there it's open. I'm just going to move it with my finger until it's closed. Okay. So first things first is I'm going to apply a small layer of my RTV. Sorry, there's my big old arm there. I'm going to apply a small layer of my RTV to the exhaust port surface. We'll put on the metal gasket, and then we'll apply a layer to the muffler. And then because we mounted in our bolts, watch how easy this thing's going to go on. And our goal is to get it as mess-free as possible, right? So the way I do this part is I've got my gasket maker here. I'm going to give it a little bit of a mix. Let's make sure that it's still nice and fresh. I've got my little tray, and I'm actually, this gets a little messy, so make sure that you have a a little paper towel handy, but I'm just going to dab my finger in it, and then I'm going to dab my finger onto the surface that I'm applying. Okay, so let me try to show you here. So I'm going to get my finger, just get a little bit, not a lot, and I just kind of dab it around, guys. All we're trying to do is get a nice thin layer. We're not trying to make a big goopy mess, but I find that if you kind of just tap around like this, it spreads it nice and even, and you really get the full application use. Okay, so let me just keep going around. If you need more, get a little bit more, but also if you go back to your old spots that you haven't, or like you can see up here, there's a little bit more gooped up than there is down here. So if I just kind of come back over there, it tends to really spread it around well. Just keep going. Literally, guys, the nicest, thinnest layer that you can possibly come up with is all we're looking for. Because this stuff, we're going to be making basically a gasket sealer sandwich, and it's going to be more than protected. So that looks good on that part. Let me get a little bit more. So I'm trying to make sure I can get it for you guys on camera. And it can be a little tricky to do with all these different camera angles and what have you. But let me get over here. Make sure we got it. There we go. Okay, and kind of goop it on there. My fan shroud on this one's a little bit in the way, but there we go. I can do some cleanup and whatnot here in just a moment. So that looks good. So I'll finish that and get it nice and tidy. Go ahead and clean off the rest of the machine too, guys. Don't make a mess out of this. It can be, it's a hard one to film, guys, because it is a bit on the time-consuming side. But I always want to try to show you my methods here. See if I can get my finger in here. This 600 is so big on the workbench too, so I'm sure you guys can understand the frustration here. But there we go. Okay. That looks good. Okay, so what it does is it almost gives it a nice saturated, well, it almost makes a little gasket on there, right? Let's get a zoom on there. Okay, you can see it's not perfect. I'm going to give it a little bit of a touch up here as we're talking. But the next step from there is going to be to go ahead and insert your bolts. You'll do that, of course, from the opposing side. Make sure 100% that you have the locking washer on there. Okay, don't forget your lock washer. You're going to make sure you need that. Zoom out just a little bit here so I got some room to work with. So I'm going to put in bolt 1 and bolt 2. They do hang out a little bit. Okay, boom. Now, I've already got me a nice thin layer of the gasket maker on there. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce my actual gasket here. And what usually helps is if you keep your tool in the bottom bolt, just kind of let it sit in there. There we go. You can use your tool as a back support. As you feed on the grommet here, or the gasket, my bad. Okay, get that on. That looks good. Same with the top part, and then just kind of finger press it into place, and it'll stick down. Just like that, boom. Okay, so we're one step closer. Come around to this side here. Just kind of press it down into place, nice and easy. Okay, looks good. And again, guys, I'm probably making this look more complicated because I'm trying to film it, but realistically, I could have this done in just a handful of minutes. Mine is trying to create an audience here for you. So, okay, we've got our thin layer on the bottom. We've got our actual metal gasket or provided gasket for muffler. Now, same thing, we just need to make a small amount here on this mating surface, which will be just about done exactly the same. I'm just going to kind of dab my fingers around. Now you can see how much easier this one is to do because it's outside the heli, and I've actually got room to sit and work with it. I believe this particular method is one I watched a long time back on, what did they call it? It was like Smack Talk RC. I think it was one that Bobby Watts did, as far as showing you how to apply the RTV and stuff, and so I've always used that method since. So if anybody out there watching this is a fan of his, That's kind of where I learned this little trick from. So that's looking pretty good, guys. I think that's going to be more than enough of our TV. Now, I know if a little bit squeegees out when I mate the parts, I can go ahead and wipe off the excessive, but what I don't want is I don't want anything to squeegee inside where, again, where my exhaust comes out. Okay, so that's kind of the thing that we're trying to avoid. So that looks good. Now, what I'm going to do, and this again might be a little bit hard for me to show on camera, but essentially what we're going for is I'm going to hover the muffler over the bottom bolt, and I'm going to slowly turn it, and then I'm going to go to the top, go to the bottom, go to the top, go to the bottom, up and down, up and down, up and down, several times until I get this nice and tight, and then I'll come back and let's do us a final review. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, here we go. We have our finished product. We have the muffler mounted, the OS55 to the OS55 motor. Trying to get a quick couple of shots here. Let's see if I can get the proper lighting that we need and get a little bit more of a closer look. Here we go. So, okay, my top, my seal off cap here, you can see turned out really good. Made a nice little red O-ring right underneath it, and you can see visibly that it is indeed sealed. Now, a lot of people try to over-tighten their muffler bolts, and that's where the stripping and rounding out comes from. Guys, it's like any other bolt on the machine, okay? Once it gets tight, give it a quick torque, you know, like a little turn, just a little jab, and then it's good. Leave it alone. You have the locking washers that are going to help keep it in place. And when you go out and actually fly this model, the first few times, once your motor gets up to temp, one of the jobs is you'll land the helicopter, and then you'll do a final lockdown on the motor bolts, because you are going to get a little bit of expansion and contraction as the motor heats and cools. So if you get the motor really hot and give those bolts a couple extra a couple extra torques, you'll find that your muffler never comes loose ever. So, just a quick pro tip there. Now, if we can try to get a look down inside, you'll see how nice this worked out. Okay, so the epoxy still stayed on the nut really well, but you can see there's just enough of that red gasket sealant. Gosh, this is a tough one to film for you guys. I didn't realize how tight it is in there, but you can see that there's just enough coming through on the sides, and that's kind of what you want. Again, we don't want overexposure. Sorry, my camera was dying. We don't want overexposure on there to where it's going to start gushing. You know what I mean? It shouldn't gush out and create like a pool, because then again, you could potentially be getting it inside the exhaust port too. Let's see if I can get you from this side. Here we go. Oh, there we go. That's way better. So you can see it made it nice and even all the way around. And then what it kind of does, the cool part, guys, is what it does. The reason why I did it in layers like that, because to be fair, and if anybody has it to say in the comments, just don't bother. But you could have just put on one layer, put on the gasket, and moved on with your day. You could have just put on just the gasket and moved on with your day. You could have used no gasket and used just liquid gasket maker and then moved on with your day. Okay? This is just the method that I decide to use, and I find it to be the most reliable. What I was going to say is I found that it's really cool, because if we take this apart, that first layer that we put on there kind of sandwiches itself between the metal gasket and then the outer layer. So when you take everything apart, it almost has this really nice, tough, thick gasket. You can't reuse it, and again, if you take your muffler off, you're going to have to reseal it like that each time. But anyways, guys, that's about it. Put on your exhaust deflector, throw on your zip tie, get the machine outside, and go and fly. Thanks so much for watching. If you have any questions or comments, drop them down below. Don't forget to subscribe. Remember, my friends, if Freddy can fly, so can you.